What started as a laugh turned into one of the most emotional moments ever caught on live television. Will Smith had made a playful jab at President Ibrahim Traoré, a moment meant for laughs. But what followed wasn't anger. It wasn't humor. Either it was something deeper, something powerful. Traoré responded with quiet dignity, a calm, unshaken presence, and what he said next left Will Smith visibly shaken. The studio froze, the audience stunned, and in the days that followed, the moment would go viral, not as a clash, but as a masterclass in grace, wisdom, and raw, necessary truth. The lights were bright, the cameras rolled. It was evening with celebrities, the talk show known for star-studded fun. On one side of the couch sat Will Smith, Hollywood's beloved star. On the other, dressed modestly in a simple suit, sat President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Collected and quietly powerful. It was meant to be a fun segment. Laughter, jokes, light moments. The host grinned, nudged Will, and asked, "So Will, ever think of running for president? You'd be up against this guy." Will laughed. The audience did too. He looked at President Traoré and, with no malice, joked, "Well, I'd at least bring a little style to the job." "No offense, President Traoré, but you look like your tailor quit halfway through." Laughter exploded across the room. Traoré smiled a soft, patient smile. Will wasn't being mean. It was the kind of late-night joke Americans hear all the time. But then something shifted. Traoré leaned in slightly, folding his hands with care. He waited. The laughter faded. His eyes met Will's, and in a voice that was not angry, not amused, but calm, deeply calm, he began to speak. It wasn't what he said that changed the room. It was how he said it, and what came next would make the world pause. "I don't wear power," Traoré said softly. "I carry it." Silence. He looked at Will kindly. "In Burkina Faso, there are children who walk miles barefoot just to learn under trees. If I wore a $5,000 suit, I would be stealing from them." Will's smile disappeared. The joke had vanished. Now there was only truth. Traoré continued, "You make movies that move people, make them laugh, cry, reflect. But I carry the weight of lives. Every decision I make, even in silence, can save or cost someone everything. If style could fix a broken hospital," he added, "I would dress in gold." The audience didn't laugh, they didn't clap. They just listened, still, breathless. This wasn't a comeback, it wasn't a lecture. It was honesty, raw, grounded, unforgettable. Will leaned back slowly, blinking. Something had reached him not as a celebrity, but as a man. And then, for just a moment, the cameras caught it. Tears in Will Smith's eyes. He looked away quickly. But the internet didn't miss it. Neither did millions who watched the clip ripple through every platform on Earth. Within hours, it was everywhere. Backstage, after the show, the energy was quiet, not awkward, just still. Will sat alone for a while, sipping water, eyes distant. A producer gently approached. "You okay?" He nodded, but said nothing. The clip, a 90-second exchange, was already viral. The title, Will Smith humbled by President Ibrahim Traoré's words? It had already hit 1 million views in under 2 hours, but it wasn't just being watched. It was being felt. One commenter wrote, "That wasn't a clapback. That was truth wrapped in grace." Another said, "I showed this to my 12-year-old. We both cried." Later, inside the dressing room, Will stood. He walked slowly down the hallway and found President Traoré seated quietly, reading a small book. Will took a breath. "Mr. President," began. Traoré looked up with a warm smile. Will's voice cracked. "I needed that." "Thank you." They shook hands. One man from Hollywood. One man from the Sahel. And in that simple moment, the world witnessed something far bigger than a talk show. It saw humanity and humility, and the kind of quiet power that doesn't need a suit. To be seen, it was more than just a viral moment. It was respect. It was humility. It was two men from different worlds, meeting at the bridge of truth. By morning, the internet had erupted. The clip of President Ibrahim Traoré's calm, truth-filled response had traveled across continents. News anchors replayed it. Influencers reacted, many with tearful eyes. Even major media outlets who rarely acknowledged African leaders were now saying his name. And one simple caption was trending around the world when dignity spoke. The world listened. In Burkina Faso, markets paused. Small radios in villages replayed the exchange again and again. Farmers listened, students gathered, elders nodded with pride. They didn't just see a politician. They saw a father figure, steady, graceful, and deeply human. Across the ocean in the US, Will Smith released a short video. "I joked on TV," he said. "He gave me wisdom. I've sat with kings. It's legends. But this hit different. There was no script, no PR polish, just humility, and people felt it. But beyond the headlines, beyond the applause, something else was beginning to grow. Something even Traore himself hadn't planned. His message, deeper than politics, beyond television, had started to plant seeds inside hearts around the world. Unintentionally, he had become more than a leader. He'd become a mirror, a reason for people to stop, reflect, feel, and soon even more hearts would be tested. In a small hospital room in Ouagadougou, an 11-year-old girl named Muna was battling leukemia. The night before, she had watched the clip of President Traore with her mother. Her little eyes sparkled. "Mama, he's not like the others." With trembling hands, she scribbled a note. "Can we send this to him?" The nurse, deeply moved by the girl's hope, posted the note on Twitter with the caption, "She only has days left, but she wants to thank her president." The letter read, "Dear President Traore, I'm sick, but when I saw you on TV, I forgot my pain for a moment. You made me proud. You didn't shout. You didn't laugh back. You just spoke like a real Papa. Thank you. I wish I could hug you." By noon, the tweet had reached over 2 million likes. Thousands shared it. But in a quiet room inside the Burkina Faso embassy in New York, President Traore saw the message. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without saying a word, he stood, put on his jacket, and turned to his staff. "Cancel the next meeting," he said. "I'm going to call a child." The hospital phone rang. Muna's mother answered, confused. "Hello?" A warm, composed voice replied. "Madam, this is President Ibrahim Traoré. May I please speak with your daughter?" The room went still. The nurse gasped. Muna's eyes lit up wide with disbelief. The president spoke gently to her, asking, "What's your favorite color? Your favorite food?" She giggled through the pain. Then she whispered, "Are you really the man from TV?" Traore chuckled softly. "Yes, little one, but more importantly, I'm your friend." Tears rolled down the cheeks of everyone in the room. Then he said, "You've already done more than many adults in this world." He reminded us of kindness. "You're stronger than me, Muna." His voice cracked. Barely, but it did. When the call ended, Traore sat alone. He looked out the window, the American city buzzing outside. But his thoughts were far away. In that small hospital room, back with a brave little girl, full of light. That night, he made a decision. He would not just be a trending face. He would become a reason. A reason to act, a reason to change, a reason to remember what real leadership sounds like. Back in the studio, long after the cameras had cut, the silence lingered. Will Smith stood behind the curtain, hands shaking, Traoré's words still echoing in his chest. A few crew members, watching quietly, realized they hadn't just filmed an interview. They had witnessed something history would remember. Will avoided eye contact. He didn't know how to process what had just happened. Softly, he stepped closer to Traore and asked, "You meant it, didn't you?" The president nodded. "Don't speak to impress," he said. "I speak because truth isn't meant to be performed. It's meant to be lived. No cameras. No applause. Just two men, one known for his charm, the other for his courage, standing in a moment of raw, unscripted honesty." Traore looked into Will's eyes. He saw something. Not fame, not bravado, but vulnerability. And then he asked, Gently, "You carry the world's laughter, Will. But have you ever let the world hear your pain?" That single question cracked something deep inside the actor. Will nodded, swallowing hard. Fighting tears. Outside the studio, the clip was already spreading. Thousands had clipped the moment. The internet was beginning to stir. But what was happening now wasn't about viral fame. It was about healing. In Philadelphia, Will's mother, Caroline, watched the moment alone in her living room. She had seen her son light up stages, make millions laugh, cry, and think. But this was different. She picked up her phone and texted him, "You've made movies, baby. But tonight, you made meaning. That man reminded me of your father. Calm, firm, kind. Don't lose this moment." Will read the message and just stared at the screen. "You made meaning?" He hadn't cried in front of his mother since he was a teenager, but now the tears came unfiltered. Something about Traore's words had pierced a part of him he thought was long buried. Something about image, worth, being seen for more than just fame. He took a deep breath, opened the Notes app on his phone. For the first time in years, he started writing. Not a script, not a joke, but a letter. A letter to the man who had unknowingly touched his soul. The next morning, the letter was posted to Instagram alongside a photo of President Traoré standing calmly on set. The caption read, "President Traoré, you didn't clap back. You didn't laugh it off. You gave me truth. In your stillness, I saw my storms. In your dignity, I saw my doubts. You reminded me, and maybe reminded the world, that a man doesn't prove his strength with force or flash, but by how he carries truth. Thank you, I'm learning, and I'm listening." The post exploded. Millions reshared it. Commented, young people cried. Parents used it to teach their children. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, President Traoré's office began receiving letters from across the world. But one stood out. It wasn't from a celebrity. It's not a journalist, not a world leader. It came from a little boy in Harlem. The final line of his letter read, "I want to be calm like you, when people laugh at me." President Traoré read the line, folded the paper, looked at his advisors, and simply said, "This isn't just about what happened on TV. Something is waking up on the other side of the world." That same night in Brooklyn, a 12-year-old boy named Marcus sat on the edge of his bed. Earlier that day, he'd been bullied at school, called names, laughed at, pushed for wearing shoes with holes in them. His mother made him tea, but it didn't help the ache in his chest. As she scrolled through her phone, she saw the viral video of President Traoré speaking to Will Smith. She turned up the volume. Marcus looked up and heard, "The world does not need louder men. It needs quieter hearts with deeper truths." Marcus froze, replayed that line 10 times. Then, quietly, he reached under his pillow and pulled out a worn notebook. He wrote, "Dear Mr. Tratt, today I was laughed at, but I didn't scream. I remembered your voice. I think that made me strong." He folded the note. I'm sure if he'd ever send it, but just writing it brought peace. For the first time in weeks, he slept through the night. And far away, in his modest office, President Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly, scrolling through messages he never expected. From a world finally ready to listen, as his team filtered through the flood of messages, one email made President Traoré stop cold. It was a scanned letter handwritten from a schoolboy named Marcus. He read it once, then again, and a third time, in silence. Looking out the window, he spoke quietly to his aide. "We lead nations, but sometimes, what we really need to do is hold the pain of just one child." Without hesitation, he gave the order. Arrange a call. That same evening, Marcus was called into his school counselor's office. His heart pounded. Was he in trouble? But instead, he was handed a phone. "Hello, who is this?" Warm voice replied. "This is Ibrahim Traoré. I read your letter." Marcus froze. He thought it had to be a joke. But Traoré continued gently. "You are stronger than many adults I've met. And I want you to know you gave me hope today." Marcus cried, not loudly, not dramatically, but in that quiet, trembling way that only happens when someone finally sees you. The next morning, with no press, no cameras, and no grand announcement, Will Smith arrived in Ouagadougou. He wore simple clothes, no entourage, just purpose. When Traore saw him, he smiled. "I didn't expect Hollywood to come this humbly," he said, half joking. Will chuckled, then paused. "I came because what you said didn't just touch me, it changed me." They sat under a tree in the courtyard of a small school. Children played nearby, unaware of the quiet moment that was about to become. History Will reached into his pocket and handed Traore a folded sheet of paper. "This is a list of every apology I owe. From my past. From fame. From pain I carried into the lives of others." Traore read the names, then nodded. "Healing doesn't begin when we fix the world. It begins when we tell the truth to ourselves." Just then a little girl ran up to Will and gave him a flower. He knelt down and smiled. There were no lights, no applause, no cameras. And yet it was the most human moment Will had felt in years. In a small barber shop on the dusty outskirts of Ouagadougou, a group of young men huddled around a flickering television. It was replaying that moment, the moment Will Smith's playful jab had turned to silence. President Traore's words echoed around the world. One of the young men, Idris, wiped his eyes and said, "This is the first time I've seen a president speak with his soul." The barber, an old man, who had lived through decades of broken regimes, nodded slowly. He didn't just speak to Will. He spoke to us, to all of us, who've been laughed at for being quiet, for being different. That day, in that humble barbershop, the video didn't just trend, it transformed. They turned off the TV and sat in stillness, not because there was nothing left to say, but because they had just witnessed something rare, pure, sacred, in a world that so often feels cold. 2 days later, a handwritten letter arrived at the Burkina Faso embassy in Los Angeles. It was from Jada Pinkett Smith. She had watched the moment live on television, then watched it again, then cried. Her letter wasn't formal. It was real. It was raw. "Dear President Traore, I don't know if you realize what you did not. Just to Will, but to millions of men watching. Men who have never been told that dignity doesn't mean domination. In one moment, with no raised voice, you taught the world that calm is not weakness. It is a quiet kind of strength. You have no idea how badly this world needed that message." Traore read the letter alone, folded it carefully, placed it inside his journal. Then, turning to his aide, he said, "We don't need louder speeches. We need louder truth, louder silence, and soon after, deeper action." Across continents, something unusual began to happen. Clips of President Traore's words were being translated into Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese, even Swahili. Not because it was trending, because somehow, truth had finally found a voice. Universities began discussing it. Psychologists wrote articles. Churches and mosques referenced it in sermons. People weren't just sharing the video, were pausing their lives to reflect on it. Even a well-known late-night comedian who had first mocked the moment returned on air to publicly apologize. "I thought it was just another awkward talk show clip, but now I see. That was history being made." Quietly, in Burkina Faso, a rural school renamed its small library the Voice of Quiet Truth, in honor of President Traore. What began as a viral moment had now transformed. It wasn't about Will Smith anymore. It wasn't about television. It had become a mirror, a symbol, a turning point. The world simply couldn't look away. 3 days after that fateful talk show moment, Will Smith made a surprise appearance on a daytime show in New York. No jokes, no rehearsed lines. Just a man, a mic, and a soul that had clearly been shaken. His voice cracked as he began. "I've made movies. I've made millions laugh, but I've never had a moment stop me the way he did." When President Traore looked at me that night, it was like he saw through the performance, not just mine, but the one the world makes us wear every single day. He paused, long silence. Then he added softly, He reminded me what it means to be a man, not through power, but through peace. By the end of his words, the room was silent. A few tears fell, unnoticed, but deeply felt. That same evening, Traore's personal assistant rushed into his office. "Mr. President, it's from Will." The email was short but raw. "Yes. I've spoken with my heart to the world, but now I need to speak with yours. I want to come to Ouagadougou, not as an actor, it's just as a man." Traore smiled gently. "Let him come," he said. "Let him see where truth grows, not in palaces, but in pain." The next morning, Will landed in Burkina Faso. There were no flashing lights, no press, no red carpet. Just President Traore in a plain shirt waiting on the tarmac with his hand extended. They embraced. No words, just a quiet understanding. Two men, separated by fame and geography, had crossed paths at a moment the world would never forget. On the sixth day, a small, impromptu press conference was held outside a youth center in Ouagadougou. Will stood beside Traore. His voice was steady. This man didn't clap back, didn't fight fire with fire. He showed me, showed all of us, what dignity really looks like when the world expects pride. He paused, eyes shining. If you're watching this, ask yourself, when was the last time you listened with your heart? Traore stepped forward, his tone calm, his words quiet. "We don't heal by mocking. We heal by recognizing the wounds in each other." The crowd didn't cheer. They stood still, silent, moved. The clip was uploaded. Within 24 hours, over 40 million views. But this wasn't entertainment. This was something purer. In homes, offices, classrooms, people cried. Because in a fractured, loud world, they had seen something gentle, something real. Dear viewer, if even one moment of this story touched your heart, made your eyes well up, or reminded you of your own quiet strength, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Not for the algorithm, but so more people can feel what you just felt. Tell us what part moved you most. Let this not mark the end, but the start of something true.
Some voices don't echo in noise. They reshape the world in silence.